Singapore is ordering 4 advanced F-35 fighter jets from the U.S., but already CNN is warning that this is a guarded message to Beijing about its South China Sea ambitions. Is it really the case? What is prompting Singapore to make this decision? And in our Ask China series, I'll talk to an immigration officer in China. How have things been changing in recent years? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. Singapore's Ministry of Defence has announced the purchase of 4 F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. with the option of purchasing up to 8 more in the future. Their current fleet of F-16s is aging fast and will need replacing by 2030. In a news report, CNN quoted analysts saying this decision is indicative of growing concerns within Asia regarding China's regional ambitions. But the Singaporean government is reported by different media to have clarified the motivations behind the decision. A statement attributed to the Ministry of Defence states that the acquisition of F-35 fighter jets by the Republic of Singapore Air Force is for Singapore's own defence and deterrence and not directed against or to align itself with any particular country. The statement also denied Singapore being a treaty ally to the U.S. So has CNN overstated the case regarding China's ambitions in the South China Sea? Just what is Singapore's security strategy, and will the acquisition of this plane change the strategic balance within Asia in any way? Joining me from South Korea is Tai Wei Lim, a research fellow at the National University of Singapore's East Asian Institute, and here in the studio, Qinduo, a senior fellow with the Pangoal Institution. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Dr. Lim, now the F-35 has been dubbed one of the world's most advanced fighter jets, costing $100 million each. Exactly what does it have that other fighter jets don't, and why is it causing so much attention in the media?
Well, the F-35 is a next generation fighter. It has at least 3 capabilities that have gained a lot of media attention. The first capability is the helmet itself. It allows the pilot to see 360 degrees and also see through the aircraft. That means if the pilot is sitting in the cockpit, he or she would be able to see the outside all around without being obstructed by the cockpit itself. The second capability is that it has a STOL and a VTOL version. STOL is a short takeoff and landing, and VTOL is vertical takeoff and landing. So there are version B that allows it to take off vertically or within a short runway.
Okay.
And the third capability is that it is able to hunt as a pack. So they are able to exchange information between aircraft when they are in formation. And so they're able to operate like one single fleet.
Okay, so now that we understand the F-35 a bit better, so let's take a look at the report and if there is anything wrong with that CNN story. First of all, as I mentioned, the Singaporean government released a statement saying it is not true what the report has said about this being a message to Singapore. It says that Singapore has been this on the CNN report says Singapore has been a close and long-time U.S. ally. It even leases space for U.S. Navy logistics and support facility and has hosted forward deployments of U.S. Navy littoral combat ships. So this is what the CNN report says. However, in a statement, as I quoted by the Ministry of the Defence of the Singaporean government, it said that while Singapore has allowed United States ships and aircraft usage of some of its military facilities, this is not a reaction to any recent developments. It is a long-standing arrangement dating back to 1990, meaning although the Singapore is leasing some space to the United States, it is not in reaction to any development, any security situation in the region since recent years. So, Qinduo, how do you look at the kind of the kind of rebuttal that the Singaporean government has issued on this report. What is wrong with the CNN assertion here?
Well, I think it's very necessary for Singapore to issue such an official statement to correct this wrong position and very misleading information provided by CNN analysis. First of all, Singapore is not a treaty ally of the United States. That's very different. They have a close partnership, but not an ally. Being an ally enjoys a different relationship with the U.S. And also, I totally agree with this official line. Actually, if you look at the relationship between Singapore and the United States, at least, let's say, goes back to 1990, when the U.S. closed its Clark Air Base and Subic Bay in the Philippines, and since that time, Singapore has accepted the signed MOUs and accepted the military facilities from the U.S. So the cooperation started, military cooperation at least started in the 1990s. So it's not something about like a South China Sea security situation.
Another key point that the Singaporean government wanted to make clear was about the purpose of its acquisition of the F-35s. The title of the CNN report says it's a message to China behind Singapore's US F-35 jet plan. And the story also quoted analysts as saying the decision indicates growing concerns within Asia regarding China's regional ambitions. But the Ministry of Defense statement of the Singaporean government says the acquisition of the F-35 fighter jets by the Republic of Singapore Air Force is for Singapore's own defense and deterrence and not directed against or to align itself with any particular country. So, Dr. Lim, it's a very direct, very clear-cut rebuttal, isn't it?
I think what we have seen from public statements regarding the purchase of the first few F-35s for testing is based on three reasons. Number one, as I mentioned just now, it has gone through a test of its capabilities, and right now the Singaporean government is buying a few to undergo full testing as well before it purchases or acquires further fighter jets. The second reason, I think, is because the Singaporean government has mentioned it is to replace the aging F-16s. Now, the F-16s are seen to be completely obsolete by the year 2030. And if you look at the year 2030, it's just 10 years away from here. So it's kind of urgent for this replacement exercise to take place. And the next reason is because the Singaporean government wants to be able to, hopes to be able to purchase variant B. That means the VTOL, STOL version, and so they are negotiating about the possibility of purchasing variant B for its own use, perhaps out of considerations for local conditions when it comes to purchasing a defense fighter. And those are the reasons that we know officially and in public knowledge were the reasons for the purchase of F-35s.
Okay. Is there any possibility that the Singaporean government might think that it wants to be able to counter or react to any possible threat from China, but it doesn't want to say it out loud, so it says it in a very hidden or obscure way in order not to offend anybody? Qinduo, do you see any possibility there? Because there are people saying, okay, they say it, but they don't really mean it.
No, I think this is like an overstatement, to say the least, from CNN here. Either out of ignorance or somehow like irresponsible for the corporate media. Basically, no one wants to be the enemy of China. No one wants to say challenge China as a large country. If they are smart, if they are wise, like you don't want to be the enemy of the United States because they are a superpower of the world. So also remember, Singapore and China, we enjoy a strong relationship. Singapore has been the largest source of foreign direct investment in China for consecutive 5 years. There's just a senseless, there's no point for Singapore to somehow view China as a potential challenge, or threat even to their security. No, it's not that case.
But the question also really is China threatening Singapore? by doing what is says what is doing in the region in the South China Sea, for instance. I think that is what the article is trying to imply.
Look, yes, there are disputes over South China Sea. That's between these neighboring countries like China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, among themselves, not bilaterally, it's basically multilateral, but it has no territorial disputes with Singapore. So Singapore is actually, I would say, in a very good position. They are not involved in the disputes. Of course, they are concerned with the peace and stability, just like China does. China wants to see peace and stability because development is our priority. We don't want to see any conflicts. If you look at the past 2 years, peace and calm has returned to the South China Sea. It's only the U.S. who are sending this warships and aircraft carrier for the so-called freedom maneuver over there.
Yeah. Dr. Lim, your answers to this question: does Singapore or is Singapore potentially, some people in Singapore potentially see China as a threat? Does the official Singaporean government has that position?
Singapore has always been a comprehensive strategic partner with the U.S. and it has a long-standing relationship in terms of military equipment acquisition. It is also a partner with China, has participated in military exercises as well as within bilaterally and within the ASEAN rubric, like what happened last year with the other ASEAN countries. So Singapore's first line of defense has always been diplomacy, and it is known for its consistent diplomacy in making friends, ensuring peace in the region. And so there has always been a sort of a consistent, long-standing kind of position that it has. With regards to the South China Sea, Singapore is a leading advocate for the Code of Conduct. It has led the talks for the Code of Conduct framework. It is also trying with the efforts of other ASEAN countries as well as China to reach towards the goal of a code of conduct in the region. And those are the sort of efforts that have been visible in the past few years.
So are you saying, Dr. Lim, I really want to drive further down the road. Are you saying because of Singapore's position on the use of diplomacy to achieve peace and cooperation in the region, that it is not a message to China that Singapore is buying these F-35s? I would like to have a straightforward answer, please.
Yes, Singapore has always been consistent about diplomacy. You can see it from all kind of examples that have happened recently. It supported the first Trump-Kim summit. It supported the framework for Code of Conduct. It continues to support ASEAN-China talks on the Code of Conduct. So all these are consistent with the sort of undercurrents of these initiatives that have been taken by Singapore.
Yeah, can I jump in when you're here?
Yeah,
I think, of course, the underlying reasons, I don't think any Singaporean, if they are smart, they would explain clearly, in clear terms, okay, this country A, country B is our target or is our potential enemy. No. But if you look at Singapore, the environment, it's a small country with 500 million people, 5 million people over there, city-state, and surrounded, of course, by, say, Indonesia, Malaysia, in particular, since the country gained its independence in 1965, and it has, not really challenges, but also, but some, let's say, it's not a problem-free relationship with Malaysia, with Indonesia. So I think Singapore has been pursuing a policy of enjoying overwhelming advantage in terms of defense power, defense capability. So they want to make sure, like, this is a deterring force. No other countries will ever think of attacking this country.
All right. Another sentence in the CNN story is also very troubling to me. For instance, because it says the South China Sea, on the South China Sea, China has claimed almost the entire 1.3 million square mile South China Sea. Qinduo, is that the case?
No, that's the, it's like often repeated, it's almost like this untrue description of the Chinese official policy. If you read the Chinese policy papers that said that, the islands in the South China Sea and adjacent waters, there are international waters over there. Yeah, some islands. The international waters, of course, a free passage of warships, of all the shipping lines will be safe and free, because that's the interest of the Chinese.
Okay, the last story let me give to Dr. Lim, and please keep it short. Okay, we know this story first came out on CNN with the same title, and then the Department of Defense of Singapore came out to clarify, to correct some mistakes. So CNN incorporated these additional information, but it didn't change its opinion, even if the Singaporean government came out and said it's not directed against anybody. So how could this central idea, central opinion that this is a message towards China stays even after the rebuttal from the Department of Defense of Singapore? Dr. Lim, do you have any possible explanation to this?
No, I'm afraid I don't have the background as to how the story came about, but I do know that the US has a democratic system and a free media, and perhaps there are different opinions and factions within the media itself, and this could be a reflection of the pluralistic views and worldviews that different media outlets hold in the US.
Okay, but definitely if it is an opinion or if it is a fact, right, there should be a distinction. I hope it is slightly clearer after the clarification from the Department of Defense of Singapore. Many thanks to my two guests, Tai Wei Lim, a research fellow at the National University of Singapore's East Asian Institute, and Qinduo, a senior fellow at Pangoal Institution. Coming up after a short break, another episode of my Ask China series. Today we'll look at immigration, and I was talking to an immigration officer from the National Immigration Administration, which was only set up a year ago, a brand new administration. What do they do, and what is to be expected? Stay with us.